I'm going to talk to you a little about architecture in general today. We're not going to be drawing. No drawing, not today. But we're going to talk a little about architecture. And I would like to start up by dividing you into 4 different groups, just randomly spread. And I would like to ask 4 questions related to architecture, and I would like you to spend just 5 minutes giving me 10 answers to each of those questions. They're very open, so you can come up with a lot of words for these questions. So for 5 or 10 minutes, I would like you to discuss these 4 questions I'm just going to write on the board. And I don't know how you're going to group. It seems like those 7 of you here could be group number 1. And there's also 7 here. You could be group number 2. And down there, that's number 3. And down there, that's number 4. Okay? It doesn't matter who's where. It's just a matter of making 4 groups. So question number 1. What do we need to make architecture? That's number 1. Please go together, spend 5 or 10 minutes giving me 10 bullet points on this one. What do we need to make architecture? Group number 2. What has an effect on architecture? Number 3, what defines good architecture? Four, where do we experience architecture? Or where do we find architecture? Okay? Now, 5-10 minutes, go down in your groups, have a discussion on this and come back with 10. Huh?
10 for each question?
10 for each question.
Group number 2 just have a...
Group number 2 only has to deal with number 2. What has an effect on architecture?
Group number 1.
Group number 1 only deals with question number 1. I think that was number 1, right? And that was 2, and that was 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's up to you. That's up to you. I don't know. Just make 4 groups. I said those 7 here, they're group number 1. Those 7 here, they're group number 2. And then the rest, that's 3, and the rest, that's 4. Okay? Okay, well, if it's 8 here, then it doesn't matter. It's
friends in China watching us.
Yeah? Have you come up with 10?
Not yet.
Not yet? Are you getting there?
Okay, right. When we do sports.
Pierre? Do you remember how you make it possible to see a note on the PowerPoint and not on the screen? But have a little talk about these things now. So group number 1. I'm going to take this down while I write. So I'm just going to write your 10 points. And
yeah, we got point number 1 was a reason to produce an architectural structure.
a reason.
Yeah, a reason and a plot.
Yeah?
for a position.
Keep going.
Imagination with ideas and a plan, what we're going to build.
One at a time. What are you saying now?
That's how I was saying, one idea, imagination, what we're going to build.
An idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
In order to do that, as number 3, we need knowledge of architecture,
Okay.
or some knowledge. Number 4, to carry out our project, we're going to need permission and understanding of the regulations.
Yeah.
Then we're going to need the equipment to draw, which would be pencils and scales and possibly computer.
Yeah.
And we need to create our project, plans, etc., to give to the client or whoever we're building for. Number 7, we need a team of craftsmen in order to construct our building or whatever.
Yeah.
Number 8, we need building materials. Number 9, we need transportation to move materials and our team in, and etc. And number 10, we need supplies of water and electricity in order to carry out our construction.
Okay.
We could carry on if you like.
This doesn't fit anymore. So what we've got from group number 1, could you please be a part of this down there? What do we need to make architecture from group number 1? That was a reason, a plot, an idea, knowledge, permission from authorities, equipment for drawing. We need to create some material, craftsman materials, transportation, and different supplies. Okay. Now we're going to do the same with number 2. What has an effect on architecture?
We got geography.
Yes?
Culture.
Culture? Yeah?
Style.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Style.
Style? Yeah?
Climate.
Yeah?
Money.
Yeah?
Materials.
Yeah?
Client.
Client?
Regulations. Knowledge. And creativity.
Was that 10? Geography, culture, style, climate, money, materials, client, regulations, knowledge, creativity. Okay, good. Number 3, what defines good architecture?
Yeah.
Okay.
We didn't came up with actually 10 attributes, but we came up with something like good design, using the right materials, satisfaction of the customer, following the regulations, the resistance in time, maybe, to adapt to the environment. I think that's kind of it that we managed to squeeze.
I've got good design, right materials, following regulations.
Yeah.
Then I skipped something, and then I said adapt environment.
Resistance in time and satisfaction of the customer.
Yeah. Resistance in
In time.
time, resistant.
In time.
In time.
Resistance in time.
Okay. What do you mean?
Like you don't have to renovate that often, and you don't have to make changes every time because of the materials you use.
Okay.
So if you use good materials, your building lasts longer and it's more efficient. But if you use like you have, for example, a cap of money, and you cannot have like the best materials, and you use less like not that good materials, that you have to renovate all the time because eventually something will break down at a point, and you have to rebuild that thing.
Okay. And the last one? Where do we experience architecture?
We've gone for basically everywhere. Like everywhere you look, everything is designed for a reason and made for a purpose.
Are you
So,
sure?
like, anything like, like the pens and the mice we use, they're all, designed and made probably by somebody. And then we've gone for things like multi-story car parks.
Yeah?
Things in ancient histories like the pyramids.
So you started out with everywhere, and now you're pointing out some.
Specific examples.
Yeah, but you don't have 10 specific examples.
I can list them if you'd like.
Yeah?
Bridges,
Yeah?
buildings, stadiums,
Yeah?
roads,
Yeah?
national landmarks like the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah?
How many is that?
Architect. Those are pretty hard demands, aren't they? Who can live up to this? The architect, you think so?
Whole team.
The whole team. Yes, I'm only trying to make you see that architecture is such a wide subject. It spans so large. And if I were to ask this question tomorrow to another class, they would come up with 10 different ones. And I'm sure that some of the groups here could say, why didn't they list this and this and this to some of those questions as well? There's so many topics to start talking about when talking about architecture. So to give you an introduction to architecture is totally impossible for me. I'll give it a try though, but there are so many things I'm not going to talk about. So I'm just going to grab somewhere and start somewhere. Okay? I'll try. An introduction to architecture. We have the Vitruvian Man, drawn by Leonardo da Vinci here. That was done in 1485 or something like that. Now what he was trying to explain here was the relationship to the body and how all things around us are in relation to our own body. I'm going to go talk more about that later on. Vitruvius was what inspired Leonardo da Vinci to make this drawing. And he was an architect, now I need to find my notes, I'm sorry, who lived in 75 before Christ to 25 before Christ. He was a very old man. And he was known for his great masterpiece called De Architectura, about architecture. He wrote about firmitas, utilitas, venustas. Durability, usefulness, and aesthetics, or beautifulness, beauty. In order to create architecture, he said, those three must be implemented in whatever you do, in the art. I believe that those you cannot. No one can say that this is not important when making a new building. We have to keep in mind the durability. How long does it last, as you were talking about down there? What is it used for? Is it easy to use, or does it work? The functions and the look of it. And all three of those have to be incorporated in order to make architecture. Now, we started out way back in time when making our houses. I'm going to talk a little about houses today, because you're working with houses. About our basic needs. So we started out living in caves. We're still living in caves, just some modern ones. And what was the good thing about the cave?
The walls are strong.
Walls are strong. They last.
No bears.
Offered protection from the elements.
They didn't need to build them. They were already there. Yeah, they're cheap. Yes. Also, one of the things is that you can go inside and get shelter from the rain and from the weather. And you can also get heat. Or the opposite. You can go inside and get shadow from the strong sun. Basic needs. That's still what we're working with today. Totally the same. Now there's another dimension to this as well. There's also something called social relationship. It's very important for us, people. Now the social relationship is both inside the house, maybe not so much in a cave, but in a house today. It's also with the people surrounding us, with the other caves or the other houses. In the whole town, maybe. We define ourselves by where we live. Now, the very basic of the cave was already there. That was easy. Now, something happened with people that made them not only want to live in this cave anymore. They suddenly realized that for some reasons it wasn't very useful for some other things as well. And then they started on adding stuff to the cave or making new ways of living. And I've not been here myself, I just found it on the internet, thought it was very describing for this process of suddenly adding something to a cave, because you realized that you had to use this cave for other things as well. And maybe it was easier if you had another room or another space, except for this big one you had inside the cave. So what happened is that they invented some kind of module that they repeated, the brick. And in order to do this, and to lift it up from the ground, They had to use some kind of scaffolding in order to climb there. That's this one. And in these ancient houses, it's still there because they're still renovating it. They're putting on the cladding, the mud, and renovating it for it to last, for it to hold against the weather. It's totally the same as what we do today. We have to keep it secure and safe, and we have to make it last from rain and snow and sun and whatever, cold, heat. They still do this with mud and clay in the world. Ghana, for instance. Beautiful houses. And what we see here is also that they also have the social dimension incorporated. Of course, depending on which culture you live in, you have different social relations. I believe in Ghana they have 10 wives or something like that. And the wife has her own little hut, and the man has his own big hut. That's not quite the same way as we used to, but has a big influence on the architecture and on the history of houses. Yes?
I know that the roofs that they're using there, they're actually pretty much used for the expensive houses. I think it's a roof that can last for like 20 or 25 years. I think it's the most, the roof that lasts the most. It's a basic technique that is long lasting.
Okay, have you been there?
No, I've actually seen a house here in Horsens who uses that kind of material that they use there.
Yeah?
Yeah, and it's pretty impressive because they use really basic tools to make that, and here they use really modern tools to make the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So
Well, we still use mud and sand as well, right?
Yeah.
It's just in a modern way.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's not such a big difference from 200 years ago or 2,000 years ago. Now there, as I said before, all over the world, this is from the States, all over the world you have different ways of living. You see, I don't know, can you see it? Can you see these lights?
Yeah.
The light is very bad for me. Okay. And here you have a little house. And in this little house, one can imagine that you would be pretty safe and have a pretty good view over the area. If there are enemies, if there are animals or anything like that, those factors had a role when doing your houses back then. Wars and tribes and Indians and all these things. These are not so relevant anymore, but that was part of the history of those houses. Now you can also see, just the same as the slide before, that the materials used are the materials you find in the neighborhood. It's so obvious here that this house is made of this material, right? It's totally the same color. And the same with the one in Ghana. They use the same mud as... They're not transporting it from China or from anywhere else. It's called vernacular architecture, when you use the materials in your own country, in your own culture. This is from Japan. This is also a hut. Very charming, very old. I don't know how long time ago it was made like this. I was just amazed to see how much it looks like, well, a combination of Danish and Ghanaian houses. Because the Danish old-fashioned houses look like this. Some kind of in between.
It's actually a living grass on the roof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's turf. That's what it's called. Dug up turf from the ground. Yeah. Yeah. And what you see here is that, again, we use wood because we used to have a lot of wood. We don't have that anymore. And it's dug into the ground. Why is it dug into the ground?
Yeah, it's insulation values.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't have, and you don't have to use so much material.
Material cost.
Yeah.
More stable.
Yeah. And more stable. Yeah. There are lots of good reasons to dig it into the ground, and of course they do it then.
back then, those, whatever they call group house and stuff, wasn't there moisture a problem down there? Because they didn't have public sewage and drainage and stuff.
Where?
These kind of houses back.
Sure they had. Lots of moisture problems. I don't know much about it, but they must have had, yes. Now a sketch showing how they lived back then. It was also a matter of functions, right? They had the fireplace in the middle of the house. People surrounded the fireplace, getting the heat. Smoke was let out through the gable. The animals inside, in one side, maybe also in this side. They also helped to keep the heat inside, probably. So, of course, the way of living back then also gave inspiration to how the house was made. That changed. So now I'm going to switch to something which is quite different. That is the language of architecture. Now, last time I was in here, you all painted those beautiful pictures up there. I think they're great. Yeah. And one of the things you had to do there was to focus on the black color and draw it. Actually, you didn't have to draw the face. You had to copy the black color on your paper, okay? But what happens is that when you look at a picture and you can see what it is, your brain starts to draw something it doesn't see. Did any of you experience this? That you suddenly draw something and you looked at it, that was not what I saw. I have to change this. That's the brain tricking us, because we know it's a face and we know how this is drawn, but it's pretty difficult. That is the brain making tricks, and I'm going to give you some more examples here. Now, first of all, what do you see here? Two people. A cup? A vase or something like that, right? Trophy. Yeah, a trophy. Do you see the black or do you see the white? Both. Okay. What is this? Spiral? No, it's not a spiral. It's circles. But the brain tricks us because the background is somehow making it into a tunnel, right? Now, I was also giving you an example last time on what defines room and 3 dimensions, and that's a matter of light and shadow. Now, here it's very visible. This one is pretty blurry. You cannot see where the shadow is, where the wall is, where the table is, or floor, or whatever it is. Up here, where the shadow is very, very clear, you can very easily see what is the ball, what is the wall, and what is the floor, right? So when the shadows are not there, it starts blurring. There is no rule of what is beautiful and what is not beautiful. There's a lot of people trying to create rules. There's a lot of people wanting to find those golden rules. But there is nothing really where you can say, if you do this and add this and do this, then it's beautiful. That you cannot make an equation or something like that. But you can. There's made a lot of research on some things. For instance, the brain tricks us, and what this mind likes is harmony and balance when looking at facades and looking at buildings and sculptures and whatever. The symmetry factor is stronger than the similarity factor. Do you agree on this? You see, this one is the same as this one and the same as this one. But when I look at this picture, I don't know if it's the same with you, I see this shape and I see this shape. And that is because the symmetry factor takes over, because there's a hidden line in here and there's a hidden line in here. Okay? So if you make something that is symmetrical, the eye catches it very fast. Maybe you don't even intend to do something that is symmetrical, but that's what happens. Also, I don't know how to implement this in a facade, but the circle is not perceived as absolutely round. It looks like it's bending, but it isn't. It's just because of these lines that it appears differently. Which one is the biggest?
They're all the same size.
Exactly, they're all the same size. Same with this one. Which one is the longest? I can't reach. Yeah, they're the same. Now back to the dimensions of the body. Everything is in relation to the dimensions of the body. That's at least what we're saying here. And there are some different people who said that as well. Now Leonardo da Vinci has painted the Vitruvian Man, where Vitruvian said that architecture and art was a matter of firmitas venustas utilitas. That was durability, functionality, and beauty. Okay, those three words. Now Zeising, do any of you know him?
No.
Do any of you know the golden section? The golden cut? The gyldne snit in Danish? You've heard about it? The white cut. Have any of you seen Leonardo, Da Vinci Code? The Da Vinci Code. Don't they talk about it there? The golden section? How to divide a picture? Some dimensions? Well, what Zeising was doing was he was writing about the golden section and how it was in relation to the body. That's also something they're talking about in this movie, Da Vinci Code, and in the book as well, if you've read that. That when you look at a piece of nature and you try to make a formula, which is called the golden section, you can actually get a lot of dimensions that are related to each other. Now, I don't know all these relations, I don't remember them, but it's something about this piece being 3 times this piece or something like that. I don't quite remember actually, but there's a lot of books written about this. And that's also what's being shown here, that somehow these dimensions are in relation to each other, to the body. And one of our very, very most famous architects in the world, at least in Europe, Le Corbusier, from 1927, he was also talking about this golden section and how it could be in relation to the body could be divided into these modular, les modulars, it's what he was calling it, les modulars in French probably. And he was also talking about how everything you create is in relation to the human body and the golden section. He was mainly speaking of facades and how to build up a facade.
I saw there was on the internet they incorporate trigonometry in with it.
I don't know.
To come up with the shapes and complex calculation of trigonometry.
Yeah, yeah. If you go into it, there are to the most of our human body is you can put them into this calculation and really calculate how long is the arm if the hand is like this, how long is your leg if your distance from the navel into your shoulders like this. All these calculations you can make on the human body, as well as the flower and the leaf and the tree. You can make those calculations. Now again, speaking of our body and our mind playing tricks with us, this is an actual real photo of a man laying down. Now let me see if it says here. The camera does not see like a human being. The form, what is it? Constancy does not exist for it. The feet which are nearer to the camera than the face are perceived larger than the face. Do you see this? They look huge next to the face. And that is the way we perceive it, the way we see it. Now, if you had to draw me standing like this with an arm in front of you, how would you draw that? You cannot see the length of my arm if it's you who have to draw it. You cannot see the length. You can only see my fingertips and my shoulder, actually. But in order to make a drawing and to make our mind understand it, you have to make some tricks, because this is the drawing, and it actually looks a little bit more correct. But it's not. That's not the way we see it, but that's the way we experience it. Again, the mind plays tricks with us. And now our vanity makes us do crazy stuff, like having those shoes, which are not really taking care of how our feet look. Well, mine's are much better. A naturally grown pair of feet, those are not symmetrical, but our shoes are. And they have a shape like this, and our feet don't have a shape like this. Okay, I'm going to give you all a 5-minute break. I think you just need to have a break, and then when you come back, I'll give you some examples of